Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 2, Episode 9. There's something about Hookfoot. I want to talk about something else briefly before we keep going. Um, we mentioned briefly the 65 rule earlier. The 65 rule was a long-standing policy. Disney obviously used it, but plenty of studios did. It basically mandated any given show could have 65 episodes, and indeed should have 65 episodes. And that was the thing. That was the slot. That was your slot. Um, you're probably wondering, that's a weird number. Why 65? Well, if you do one episode each weekday, you will hit the 65th episode at the end of the 13th week of any given run, which means that 13 weeks is roughly one quarter. And we also know that all financial matters tend to be considered based on a yearly quarter. So, each quarter has its own show or shows dedicated towards it. And thus you can also push out 4 shows a year. That's the point behind the 65 rule. Now, whether that's valid or not is debatable, and even by the time the rule became more public knowledge, it was already starting to get a little bit out of date. In fact, the rule was officially abolished in 2005. However, it's worth noting that the very concept of the 65 rule still tends to exist, because what a 65 rule boils down to is 3 seasons. Now, think off the top of your head, how many shows can you think of that got 2 or 3 seasons? And you'll start to see the parallels of this concept everywhere, because, like I said, it was just the standard rule for literal decades, even when it doesn't actually apply anymore. Yeah, Disney loves this rule and still uses it, even though they have officially discontinued the policy. The biggest variance is nowadays they will not use the rule as an excuse for canceling a show, which is what they used to do. Even successful or popular shows would be shut down because they'd hit their 65 limit. You're gone. Nowadays, if a show is particularly popular, usually they'll let it keep going. Anyways, so we have a big flash forward with some narration. Cool. I mean, the 65 rule is a terrible idea, but I don't even want to get down that particular... Okay, so part of the problem is the 65 rule is a nice base guideline, but that's the point, right? Like, it's a base guideline. It should be like your starting point for determining where you want to go with the rest of your show. Let me try to explain this in different terminology. Imagine for a moment that you're in a room with a bunch of suits, and Mr. Red walks in. And he's like, behold, hang on, let me get my Mr. Red voice going here. All right, everyone. It's time for me to be giving you a pitch on an episodic idea, a televised series that I've been considering. No, I'm too dry. Can't do it. And so Mr. Red comes in and he tries to sell us on his show. Now, let's say we think his show might actually have some validity. Well, we have to greenlight a certain amount of it up front. Now, if we greenlight just the pilot, which is very, very common, that means we don't have a lot of faith in this show. We want to see what you've got going first. However, we also know that just by greenlighting the pilot, we are also sabotaging the show immediately, because that's a lot of time and effort and work that's going towards something that's only going to produce 1 episode. And almost immediately after that episode produces, we know there's going to be a gap of post-production and people moving on and getting other jobs before we actually get a chance to do test screenings, see what people think of it, and decide if we actually want to greenlight the show. Yes, that's right. I actually commented on this earlier, but one of the biggest reasons why the ridiculous majority of shows only ever got a pilot is because even the pilots that people liked, well, now that it's been months since you've made that pilot and everybody's moved on to other projects, good luck getting all those people back together again to continue making the show. Now, that can happen, and it does happen, but you could see how pilot to show is a gap, right? So, okay, we understand this, and we want to go ahead and give you at least 1 season. So we give you 1 season to work with something. But actually, that's already sabotaging you again for basically the same reason. A little more zoomed out, but the same general concept. If we get together a team and they only put together 1 particular season, and now we decide to keep going with it, we need to know that well in advance, which means we're going to have to do some predictions, we have to do some guesswork, and you get it. Because we have to decide if you're getting a season 2 sometime about the 1/3 of the way through season 1. That's about when we need to decide on that particular point. And if we don't, well, then your show's probably canceled. This is another thing. Yeah, Bab 5 was very strange on this one, but I'm getting off topic. So what tends to happen more is they tend to give you several episodes, like, say, 65, about 2 or 3 seasons worth. And in 2 or 3 seasons, you have the gap and range in order to be able to have time to grow. We have a good return on investment. It actually lowers the overall cost of the show long term. And now you have the ability to see, is this show going to be feasible? Because we can decide somewhere around season 2-ish if your show's going to be feasible, which is exactly what they did with this very show. Now, we also know they sabotaged the crap out of this show, so that's not really a good example, but you can see the mentality. You can see why they have the 65 rule. The problem is, and O40 already said this in chat, it shouldn't be a rule. It should be like a rule of thumb, right? It's not accurate. It's not specific to every situation. It doesn't apply in every case. It's just a neat, simple, a suggestion to, I hate to quote Pirates of the Caribbean, but here we are. It's a suggestion for how to greenlight shows that you think are going to be successful. Here you go. You get 65 episodes to sell us on future seasons. If you do, cool, and if you don't, you don't. 65 seasons, by the way, or 65 seasons. Wow. No. Only a few shows have reached that part. 65 episodes also gives them time to test the ground for merch. If a show is doing particularly well, they might be able to start hitting the merchandising angle and the licensing angle. And that is something that can generate even more money on the side. So, all of that's a long roundabout way of saying that I think the 65 rule exists for a reason and absolutely should not be adhered to as absolute law. How many seasons are we up to for Simpsons at this point? I know, like, General Hospital is up there, like way up there. So, I guess I should talk about the episode proper. We need coral bombs. Those were cool. So, at first I thought I was really going to not like this episode, and I can explain why very, very simply. Narration. The beginning of the episode starts off with her narrating. We do a flash forward, we narrate back, like this is frickin' Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and she spends some time narrating the events right before they happen. Literally tell then show, which is probably the worst possible circumstance. There's tell and don't show, which is irritating. There's show then tell, which I'm okay with. There's just show, which is awesome. And then there's tell then show, which is just, what are you doing? And they do this for several scenes in a row. They tell us something, and then they show us it actually happening. Huh? And this was irritating me quite a bit. Right up until the mermaid showed up, pretty much, which is about when the narration stopped. Okay, cool. I'm actually with that. The mermaid was played by Katie Mixon, which I looked her up, and she's done a bunch of stuff, mostly a comedic actress, sounds familiar. Played a main character on several shows prior to this. I'm not saying... Yeah, we've lost Hookfoot. So, I don't want to keep selling this idea. This would have been a great time to do a little bit of world building tying into the princess verse. Literally, that's a mermaid. She's not Ariel, she's not royalty, but she's a mermaid. Tie it in a little bit, right? Like, make her from Ariel's kingdom. I actually can't remember the proper name for it, but the kingdom that's under Triton, right? Or maybe she's someone who is an outsider, an outcast from that kingdom, which would tie her into to Hookfoot a little bit, you know? Only 35 seasons. Wow. Feels like one of that. Yeah, no, it's a perfect tie-in. It even makes her, like, even visually, she seems more less typical beauty than your typical mermaid, which is what they were in Little Mermaid. But that's like visual shorthand for how much she doesn't fit in with the rest of Atlantis, which is why she bailed on them. And that's a perfect parallel to Hookfoot, who looks like Hookfoot. No, I do too, Mr. Ed. That's sort of my point. What I'm trying to say is, she already perfectly fits the thing I'm describing. She's even got a tattoo. It's great. It's just they didn't actually do it. They put all the pieces. They lined up all the dominoes on the board, and I'm like, yes. And then they just walked away from the table, and I'm like, wait, no. You have to. Why didn't you knock over the dominoes? And yeah, she fits Tangled very well too. It's funny how much of a perfect little puzzle piece this is. Anyways, she's good, though. I do like her. I do like her presence here, and I do like how she is a thing. And I do like how we have an episode focusing on Hookfoot. It's always nice to get more time and effort spent on the non-central characters, the big three, right? We certainly have the big three in this show, right? Eugene, Cassandra, and Rapunzel. So it's nice to see other characters get a little bit of time and development, and Hookfoot hasn't really had a lot, so thumbs up. We need to spend time like on Max. The problem then is that they then spend a couple of minutes on what I can only refer to as filler, because you see, Hookfoot is gross. Did you know that Hookfoot is gross? Did you know? Were you aware of the fact that Hookfoot is gross? Did you know he's gross? Isn't that so funny? How gross he is? Okay, and then we've hit our quota. Yeah, it is the Neelix is a bad cook thing all over again. And again, it only lasts for a few minutes, so I don't want to come down too hard on it. But really, I wanted to just fast forward through this section. So we just get past that. Eugene and Rapunzel really like giving contradictory advice. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then Steve! No, Steve's dead. Okay, I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole on something that's clearly just a runaway gag. However, if she knows a specific fish well enough to be personally, interacting with that fish, that says a lot about fishing and eating animals for food, which is always one of those weird, uncomfortable things that Disney has always tried very, very hard to not even acknowledge. To just straight up be like, no, not a thing. Not a thing. Don't think about it. No. We're fine. We eat meat. And I know fish are sapient, but this one's just, it's the droid slavery thing. It actually really is. There have been interviews from Disney creators and Disney executives who straight up say, we just don't touch that. It's just don't think about it too much. Just go with it. And it's like, okay. You actively want me to not think about the world building of your settings. Okay. It's not like there aren't ways around this, Even Zootopia ran into this issue. Do you remember that? I talked about that briefly during the room. Because the creators wanted to showcase a little bit more how they solved the food issue in Zootopia. Because they did solve the food issue in Zootopia, and they were told no. So you'll notice they don't showcase what predators eat at all in Zootopia. Not once. They show all kinds of other food, but they never show what the predators eat. So it's all shoved off into the corner. And the only way you'd actually know about that is if you listen to the interviews, right? It bugs is the short answer, Blade Traval. Yeah, they had to cut a scene out. That's right. I actually forgot about that. And so, it's this whole thing that the Disney executives have been mandating for a very long time. That we do not think about the fact that we eat the creatures who are also sentient and sapient. Just don't think about it. I know, Doom Rider, it's so weird. I love Zootopia to death. It's one of my favorite films of all time. But, yikes. So, Steve! No! He's okay. Oh, alright. I do like a good kelp salad. Anybody else ever had kelp salads? It's actually easy for them to suck because it's easy for them to be too fishy, but a solid kelp salad, that's some good stuff. I haven't had one in a while. Anyways. So then we have some sitcom shenanigans, which is a sitcom shenanigan moment. However, one of the things I find most interesting about this is they're still trying to do some character stuff, even while, they're shenaniganing. Rapunzel's big shtick is doing everything in her power to be as open and honest as possible. And Eugene's big shtick is trying to constantly work at it to put the extra effort necessary into being better than your normal self. Both of these make perfect sense for these two characters. Rapunzel grew up in a frickin' tower, barely understands the concept of deception even now. And meanwhile, over there, Eugene grew up as a professional thief who constantly had to put on a mask and lie to everyone he interacted with until he met Rapunzel. It's actually so overt, I feel silly for pointing it out, but it's a nice bit of character beat on top of the otherwise ha-ha shenanigans moment. Yeah, it's like breathing, exactly. So, Hookfoot decides to drop all shenanigans and just be like himself. Like, okay, look, this is cool. And yeah, they actually work out pretty well. Go figure. We have a term for that in real life. It's called winning the lottery. And I know that sounds strange because you're like, oh, you won the lottery. No. I mean, that is actually what we call it. When you find someone, let's run through this, okay? You find someone, you fit with them, you recognize that you fit with them, they fit with you, they recognize they fit with you, and you both happen to have the time and availability to try and develop that into a relationship. That is a lot of dice rolls. It's one of the reasons, and I don't want to sound in any way like I'm casting judgment here, that a lot of people tend to settle. Because a lot of people don't find that person. They don't run into that one random person who happens to meet all of those criteria. And by the way, there's actually more criteria than that. I'm just giving you the brief overview here, right? That's why it's winning the lottery, because the odds are astronomical in order for that to actually work. So that's kind of what happens here. Hookfoot has found someone who really clicks with him, who he really clicks with her, and both of them recognize it in both directions. They both got extremely lucky here. And it's kind of cool. And her expression when he admits that he thinks he loves her is actually pretty awesome. And then this is, of course, when she realizes, oh, no, I actually like you too. And yeah, obviously it was a setup. So then we have our first fight sequence, which I'm just going to brush over. And then the glue bomb, excuse me, the coral bomb. I really do like the coral bomb. It's such a cool thing. And then Hookfoot talks to her, and this is when the big reveal happens. She's like, no, I was just using you to hold the merch, but no, I actually liked you. And I like how he's the one who tells her she has to go straight, which is an interesting take from someone who he himself used to be that kind of person and has since gone straight. And for all accounts, it's actually worked out pretty well for him. So you can see why he's speaking from experience when he says, no, really, you should probably go straight here. This would be a weirdly good time for Hookfoot to just leave the narrative. Not because I don't like him as a character, it just makes for a really good narrative beat. Hookfoot decides to flee with Seraphina, and the two of them go off to live their own life and try to make a new run of it, right? That would actually be kind of cool, and I'd be like saluting him as he goes. Yeah, just let him have his happy ending. And let him go off and do his other. It's not like he has to leave the show completely. He can still show up periodically for like little cameos, or maybe we touch up on what he's been up to. You know, you could do an adventure thing where it's like, oh my God, we found the ancient island of Dinka-Donka-Doo, but there's a bunch of monkeys on it. You gotta help us. There's ways you can work with that. Yeah, you can have him show up in the finale. You could have him send letters. There's all kinds of ways he could still be relevant even if he leaves the camera. Unfortunately, that is not what they do, which is a damn shame. Also, Shorty escapes by... Oh, jeez! Donkey! Mermaids are attacking! So Shorty escapes by tunneling out. And hey! Wouldn't that make sense if he was Varian? In fact, this even makes sense narratively and thematically if this is Varian, because Varian escapes, gets out, and then helps the others escape, which is kind of indicative of how much he's gotten better, how much he's starting to reform. Because he has this opportunity, maybe even have him think about it. It's like, oh God, Varian, please help us. Okay. And like he thinks about it for a minute, but he decides, yeah, all right, I'll help. And then he goes and he helps them get out. You know, like another step, right? Another step on that reformation. If you're paying attention, I believe this is actually the third time the Varian scene could have been him slowly reforming himself over the course of the narrative. So then we see the law enforcers. And I'm sorry, if they're just cops, why are they so evil? Moving on. So they, after having lost horribly in the previous fight, there's this big like cavalry showing up moment where it's like, behold, we're here to win this time. What's changed? In fact, what's really weird about this scene is it's portrayed like the cavalry moment, but it's not. because they just lose again. This is such a weird moment. And then that leads to her being like, no, here, I will go quietly. And then they're like, oh, okay. Hookfoot then gives her his hook foot, which means he is now No Foot, which actually sounds kind of cool. Who are you? I am No Foot. Then again, I'm just probably biased because I always thought No Heart was a cool name. Points if you get it. However, I have to point something out. When he's sitting on the beach, he has no foot. Of course he doesn't. However, when he's walking along the beach going after all the mermaid tears, he suddenly has his hook foot again. Was that an animation error? Or did he just have spares? I'm sorry for being weirded out by this, but you'd think that's the kind of thing they would spend any amount of time on whatsoever. Although, and I agree with you completely, Bionic Punk, if Varian was here, this would be a perfect time for Varian to help build him a spare. Maybe give him an upgrade. But no, instead he just has another hook foot, and I'm going to be paying attention to that in future episodes because I'm really curious. Anyways, we got to review this sucker. It's a pretty good episode, I would say. I do think it is disappointing, but only because it could have been even better. Which I feel like I say a lot about this show. Yeah, I'm debating between yellow and orange because we have some good character focus. And we've got some good moments. The early part kind of sucks, if I'm being honest. But then it starts finding itself, but then it sucks again for a minute. But then it's actually got a good character beat, and then it's got a good guest star, and then we've got some decent action. And then we've got the weird second fight scene. I don't know. I'm feeling a really... I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm still kind of torn here. Oh, my back. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of feeling low orange, which still qualifies as orange. That's how that works. I think I will agree. We'll go ahead and orange that up. I don't need to be generous. The show needs to earn it. Because if it does not know the true power of the color side, the rainbow side? The rainbow side of the Force, then it would never engage in true power. So the next episode is called Happiness Is... ... Are they still stuck in this? By the way, I wanted to point that out really quick here. So first we had Beyond the Corona Walls, Return to the Quaid, and Goodbye and Goodwill. All of that was in the town of Vidaros, or however you pronounce that. Then we had Forest of No Return, Freebird, and Vigor the Visionary. All of which were in a forest. Not the same forest, but they were all pretty foresty. Again, I think pushing Forest of No Return to the last of those three would have worked a little bit better. Then we have Keeper of the Spire, completely by itself, and then King Pascal and something about Hookfoot, both of which are on this island. I do appreciate the, I guess the visual continuity. There's a real vibe of them moving forwards, and there's a real vibe of the terrain shifting as they go forwards. And I do like that they spend more than one episode in most of these locations. It works for me, even though these are predominantly slice of life episodes. The changing terrain and environment can and does inform some of the stories. Yeah, environmental consistency. That's a good way to put that, Bruce. So I'm actually appreciating that more than I thought I would. I'm curious if they're still on the island in the next one, because there's all kinds of things. Like, I noticed one of them is called Max and Eugene in Peril in the High Seas, and so I have to point out that that's probably going to be the one where they get off the island, especially since so far it's been 3, 3, and now 3, right? So either way, we'll find out if I'm right in about 23 minutes. I am going to go ahead and cover this episode, and then I will break for lunch. So